Everybody, we're doing this video to go over Acts Part 2, Session number 8. It covers Acts chapter 18, verses 1 to 11 and 18 to 21. This particular lesson goes over when Paul showed up to the city of Corinth. One of the interesting things about this particular time is that Silas and Timothy, who are with him on this missionary journey he was on, they were not with him when he showed up. He came by himself. And so this particular city, Corinth, was a tough place to show up to. I mean, to especially show up by yourself. It was a place that was not known for its traditional morality as we would think of it today, a Judeo morality. The Jewish morality would not have been here. This was a very immoral city. It was known that way even by people who didn't have Jewish morals. These are, to Corinthianize something would be to say something was very, very corrupt. And so this was a really tough place. And so Paul shows up basically by himself, and he wants to do what he's doing in all these other cities: do evangelism, reach people, disciple them, raise up leaders, plant a church there, and then move on to the next place. And he does it effectively. In fact, in our church in Trinity Baptist, we're studying First and Second Corinthians. There's at least those two letters, and later on he writes a different letter to them. It said later on, but it wasn't later on because he references it in the letters that he wrote to them. So I say all that to say what ended up being effective there, although it was a very difficult season. And so this talks about at least the 18 months that he was there during that time. So we learn here about being effective as believers, and some of the things that he did that made him more effective there in Corinth. Number one, so he says this is the big idea for the lesson: we can be more effective when we partner with other believers to do three activities. So what are these things that he did? The first activity he did is he built relationships. He got partnerships. He had people that were of like mind. When he found them, it was a good thing, right? So we'll see that verses 1 to 4 of Acts chapter 18. After these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth, and found, man, what a cool thing to do right away. He found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. So we find out Aquila and Priscilla. Later on, we know that these people had poured into Apollos. These are good people. They were Jewish. They had been kicked out of Rome because of Claudius, which I'm guessing means Claudius Caesar. So they got kicked out, and so they had come to Corinth. And they had some commonality with Paul. You'll see in verse 3, because he was in the same craft, he abode with them. Talking about Paul, abode with them, and wrought, meaning he worked, he did his craft with them. For by their occupation, they were tent makers. So now we use that term tent making missionaries, people who are doing tent making in the Christian vernacular and missiology, the theology of missions and doing missions. We talk about people who are tent makers as people who are doing their occupation that isn't their religious Christian occupation, like preaching, teaching, making disciples, building churches. The tent making would be that other skill. I know people. My uncle's a tool salesman. He sells tools he has a big truck, and he sells tools to people who to mechanics and to oil field workers where he lives. And so he has that trade that he does, and that helps to finance his ministry. He's also a pastor of a church in Texas. And so he does the pastoring thing really full time, and he does the tool thing full time. Most people who are tent making are very, very busy. So anyway, there's this partnership here. They're building this relationship together. They're letting him live there. They have the tent making in common. He's helping. Maybe he's helping to pay for his way of and being there and being with them by doing this work with them. And then it says he also reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. So Corinth is a large enough city that there is a synagogue there. And he starts with the people that, again, have some context of who Jehovah God is. But he's not just dealing with them. He's also dealing with Gentile people who are apparently in the synagogue and people beyond that. And so, but he's doing that with this basis of having people there that are helping him. You know, being a lone ranger is a really tough thing when it comes to like making disciples, reaching people for the Lord, planting churches. By definition, you can't do it alone. And sometimes God provides people to help. And just in the nick of time, like, you know, of course it's not by luck, God's doing this, but, it's important that if you're going to be effective for the Lord, that you have good relationships. But once those partnerships are made, the clear what you're doing as a result of those things to be effective. Number two is to share the gospel. So we're more effective when we do this together by building relationships. Number two, sharing the gospel. And when Silas and Timotheus were come from Macedonia, this is down in verse 5, Paul was pressed in the Spirit and testified to the Jews that Jesus was Christ. So you can see all throughout this particular passage just evangelistic language, right? He is led by the Spirit. He's pressed in the Spirit and testified to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. This is him going, it's my job to tell people that Jesus is the Messiah. And when they opposed themselves and blasphemed and shook his raiment and said unto them, so when they opposed themselves and blasphemed, he shook his raiment. This is a very Jewish thing to do. He's saying it's this expression of this. Whoa, that is amazing! I just had fireworks go off. I don't know what happened. It's this expression of grief. That's what I was trying to think of, the word grief. The fireworks distracted me. Anyway, this grief, he's saying, like, you're blaspheming, you're opposing the very thing that God, I'm bringing to you to save you. You're opposing that. So he says, your blood is upon your own heads. I am clean. Why is he clean? Because he shared in a very clear way. They just rejected it. And he says, from henceforth, I will go to the Gentiles. And so you have that, again, language. Look at all the evangelistic. He testified to the Jews. He says, I will go to the Gentiles. This go language is very much evangelistic. He departed thence and entered into a man's house named Justice. So he's going where they're living, right? There's that evangelism there. Evangelistic kind of mindset. I'm going to a place where people are, to their house. And he goes to Justice, again, someone that already believes in God, someone that worshiped God, whose house joined hard to the synagogue. And Crispus, the chief ruler of the synagogue, believed on the Lord with all his house. And many of the Corinthians hearing, believed and were baptized. There you go. You've got the order. It's proclaimed because he went, he proclaimed, they heard, they believed, they were baptized. Amazing. Now he's facing opposition. This is a tough place. The whole synagogue didn't believe. Just some people in the synagogue, key people, believed. Maybe Paul was thinking it was time to leave, even though he shared the gospel. He'd had some success, but maybe he's concerned that maybe he's not going to have a lot more success. This is where he hears from God. Verse 9, then spake the Lord to Paul in the night by vision, be not afraid, but speak and hold not thy peace, for I am with thee, and no man shall set on thee to hurt thee, for I have much people in this city. There's a lot of people that live there. There's a lot of people that God knows will respond to the gospel when they hear it. And so it says that Paul's response to that vision is that he continued there 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. What's he doing? He's making tents. He's teaching people. What an amazing thing. So, and you see that he's doing that with people that are there. He's partnered with Aquila and Priscilla. We know later on that those guys were helping in that teaching ministry. And so we know that's part of it. There's seasons for everything. And so Paul takes these people with him and follows God's lead. Of course, he followed God's lead in staying. Now you're going to see him following God's lead and going. Verse 18, and Paul, after this, tarried there yet a good while, and then took his leave of the brethren. There were no brethren when he got there. There's brethren now. And he sailed to Syria, and with him, there is that idea of doing it together. And with him, Priscilla and Aquila. He took them with him. They had partnered together in the gospel, and so now he's taken them on this journey with him. Having short said Cenchrea, he had a vow, and he came to Ephesus and left them there, but himself entered into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they desired him to tarry longer time with them, he consented not. There's that idea of leading. He feels like he's made a vow. God's told him when to go, told him how to stay, but then he feels free to go, to be led of God to leave. But as he left them, verse 21, he bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I'll return again to you if God will. So there's that idea of God leading. If it's God's will to do this, I'll be back. And he sailed from Ephesus. Man, 3 things that make us effective, especially when we do it with other people, including doing it with God. You're partnering with people. You're building relationships with people that help you. You're sharing the gospel with people and doing that with people that help you. And then you're following God's lead in all of this. Always the right thing to do is to share the gospel, but knowing where to do that and when to do that, that's something that we follow the Lord's will on. And so there are seasons in life. Not everybody that's in the places that they are right now are going to stay there. I tell people all the time in our church, everybody's leaving. I'm not necessarily planning on leaving anytime soon, Trinity Baptist Church, but at some point I'm not going to be here because I'm going to either die or God's going to lead me to some other place. I'm here at the Lord's pleasure, right? And so we got to be open to that. God has you where you are, and God may be leading you somewhere else, but while he's there, you got to do what he says and you got to follow his lead. So let's be effective. Like we do that when we minister with other people, when we share the gospel along with other people, and that as we all do that, we are all tender to what God would have us to do, where God would have us to be, and when he wants us to be there. I hope this helped you as you think through the lesson, and it definitely gives me some context as I think about the letters to the Corinthians that we're studying, that Paul sent. And anyway, I hope that this makes you a better Sunday school teacher and a better gospel leader as well. Hope you have a great day.